Join me now with more on Biden's economy, America's accountant Dan Geltrude. Dan, it's so great to see you. So Dan, we hit a 39-year high with inflation at 6.8%, and we heard from the White House. And rather than hearing any sort of plan or how it's going to be fixed, they're blaming Republicans. I mean, you really can't make this stuff up.
You can't, Stephanie. Look, the White House has to sooner or later realize the buck stops there. So when you have a situation like we're in right now, with inflation going to the highest it's been in 4 decades, you have to say, is there something that we're doing just maybe that's participating or causing this to happen? And the answer is, of course. This is policy driven. I keep saying it over and over again. And inflation is going to continue to rise until policies change. And what policies are we talking about? We're talking about energy policies. We're talking about labor related policies, because those are the 2 key things that are really impacting inflation. It goes to the supply chain and it goes to the cost of energy.
And just for our audience, I wasn't exaggerating. We actually have a clip of White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki blaming Republicans. We'll look at it and react after. Roll tape.
Well, we've seen costs increase in some areas, and we've seen them move in a good direction in some areas as well. What we need to do now is think about what we're going to do about rising costs. What is our plan to address rising costs? You saw every single Republican in the House vote against Build Back Better. What were they voting against? Yes, they were voting against the president's agenda. They were also voting against lowering costs. They were voting against lowering costs for childcare, lowering costs for elder care, lowering costs for health care. And I think the not argument, because he has a very good working relationship with Senator Manchin, but I think the case he will make is that this is exactly the time to pass this bill and move it forward so that we can lower costs for the American people on all of those topics. And what we would also convey to them is you should look closely at who has a plan here and who's just shouting from a megaphone about it being a problem. We all agree it's a problem. It's who's going to do something about it.
So blame Republicans, and then now they really are trying to really wedge in Build Back Better right before Christmas. Some are suggesting that it's probably not going to go through Christmas, but who knows at this point.
You know, Stephanie, it's interesting what Jen Psaki just said. She said, basically, we have to do something. It's better than nothing. I would actually argue here that government doing nothing in this particular case is a better option, because it's the policies of continuing to try to stimulate the economy, to continue to boost demand when we have a supply problem, is going to make it worse. So yes, Jen Psaki, do nothing.
And, they can say whatever they want, but regular Americans, smart people, see what's going on here. And according to a latest CNBC poll, Biden's approval rating when it comes to the economy and handling of the pandemic are taking a big hit. So they can say what they want, but people are feeling it every single day.
You know, Steph, I really believe that Donald Trump would have been reelected had it not been for COVID, but not COVID as a standalone. It was how COVID impacted the economy. So now what you see right now is Joe Biden really suffering from the same thing. He made a lot of promises related to COVID. He hasn't been able to deliver on those promises. Now what's happening is it's continuing to negatively impact the economy, and people are really feeling it. So as hopefully we get past the pandemic, hopefully things are getting better, even though there's variants. Hopefully they're not as serious. People are turning to, wait a minute, we can't afford our essential costs here. Food, shelter, clothes, you name it. So that is going to come back to bite him. And if he doesn't pay attention to it, I think he's really going to take a beating, the Democrats are. in the midterms and probably in 2024 if nothing changes.
Yeah, for sure, the midterms. And just in general, you see a lot of people trying to flee states that have, a lot of regulations and policies and high taxes, like California, for example. And this is one of the latest people to move their headquarters out of California to Texas. It's Gordon Ramsay. He's the reality TV chef. I don't blame him. I understand why he'd want to go to Texas.
This is why, in a nutshell. It's really hard to move out of the country. So to some extent, we have to accept higher federal taxes. However, on the state side, and state taxes can be really significant. In California, you're talking about being at like 13% as the highest level for an individual. Why would you stay there when you can move within the United States? So you're at 13% in California, you move to Texas, and it goes to 0. So if you have the ability to move, well, then you move. And the states are going to have to realize, and I think they are seeing it, is that they're going to be competing with each other to attract wealth, to attract business, to attract a growing population, which ultimately leads to more representation in Congress. And that's key, Stephanie, where every single vote counts.
Yeah. And then recently we had talked about how Elon Musk had moved some of his operation to Texas. And we've heard a lot of stories about New Yorkers and bringing their businesses to Florida. So it makes sense. And as you just pointed out, a lot of reasons why people would have a good reason to leave. That's for sure. Well, Dan, we're going to leave it here. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Steph.
Of course. Coming up next.